Good morning, Wabash. Today speaking at the Pioneer Chapel is Dr. Ethan Hollander with his talk entitled, What's It Worth to You? Ethan Hollander came to Wabash as a professor of political science in 2008. He was the winner of the 2015 McLean-McTurnan Arnold Research Fellowship and the author of Hegemony and the Holocaust, a book based on extensive archival research in Berlin, Jerusalem, and College Park, Maryland. Dr. Hollander lives in Crawfordsville with his wife, economics professor Dr. Christy Beyun, and their newborn son, Isaac Howard, who apparently woke him up at 4 a.m. this morning. Dr. Hollander also sits on the Crawfordsville City Council, where he proudly represents Ward 2, the district that includes the college, downtown, and of course, Backstep Road Company. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Hollander.
Good morning, Wabash. So there were so many things I wanted to talk about today. I didn't really know where to begin. Part of me wanted to talk about COVID, or the election, or Black Lives Matter, or the imminent demise of American democracy. And I couldn't decide, so I guess I kind of figured, well, I'll just kind of talk about something that touches on all of them, which is our seeming inability as a society to talk about any of these things in a way that leaves space for common ground. Well, as you know, I'm married to an economist, and one thing that economists know is that you don't have to find common ground. The butcher and the baker and the brewer, they trade with each other not because they like each other, they don't even have to know each other. In order to trade, the only thing they need is a price. Price is that thing that allows us to know how much we value something. It's the thing that allows us to do business with each other, even if we disagree about everything else. And that's because the one way we can know, it's not the only way actually, one of the ways that we can know how much something is worth to us is by looking at how much we're willing to pay to get it. And so today, rather than talking about COVID or racial injustice or any of these things in terms of how bad they are, which I think we all know, I want to talk about these things in a language that we all understand, the language of price. Now, for some things, finding a price is easy. We all know how much a cup of coffee costs. We all go to the store and we buy them all the time. And so we know, we go through that daily practice of deciding how much I'm willing to give up in order to get one of those. But price is a lot harder to figure out when this is the kind of thing that you can't just go and buy in the store. How much is the environment worth? How much am I willing to prevent another unarmed African-American man from getting shot? How much would I pay to prevent a school shooting? How much would I be willing to make rock and roll good again? I mean, just sort of imagine this scenario. Hello, sir. Welcome to Starbucks. May I take your order? Yeah, sure. I'll take a mass shooting, please. School or house of worship? Oh, I don't know. Surprise me. What size? Oh, small. I'm sorry, sir. This is a Starbucks. I'll give you a tall. And I know, like, you're not supposed to laugh about this stuff, but it is sort of an element of Jewish humor that you laugh about your tragedies because the only other option is to cry about them. And I don't know about you, but I've done enough of that lately. How much do we think something's worth? And it's not just a theoretical issue. This is a real issue. Because if you want to compensate the fishing industry for an oil spill, or if you want to compensate Native Americans for a lost way of life, or if you want to figure out how musicians are going to make money now that everybody can download their music for free, or if you want to calculate how much to spend on security in order to prevent a school shooting, these are all things we have to do, and we have to figure out where to start, and that means talking about price. That's our common currency. And that means engaging in some hilariously uncomfortable thought experiments. So I want you to join me here. I want to do a hilariously uncomfortable thought experiment. I want you to think about how much you would pay in the following scenario. And I also, by the way, I want you to take out your dinkly-do. I don't know why we call these things phones. I haven't used mine as a phone in months. So take out your dinkly-do, and I want you to think about how much you would pay in the following scenario. Let's say we knew that somehow we knew that someone on the Wabash community was going to die over the course of the next month. And we don't know who, and we don't know where, and we don't know when. It could be a professor, it could be a student, it could be me, it could be you. And there's not a lot that you could do to make sure that you're not the person. Let's say it's going to be like a random lightning strike. Short of just staying in your home the whole time, you are exposing yourself to some risk. But, on the other hand, look at the bright side. There are a lot of us, and so it probably won't be you. Well, that's the question, right? How much would you spend in this scenario, you personally, in order to make that not happen? And I'm going to call on you, so think about this. Think about this carefully, get it ready, and I want a number, like an actual number, a dollar figure. I don't want you to say, oh, I would borrow the money. Nobody would loan you the money for this kind of thing in the first place. And besides, if you give up more money than you have, you're going to starve to death, right? This is a personal amount that you would pay out of your own pocket in order to prevent one of us from dying. All right, now type that number into your phone. And I want you to show it to the guy next to you, and I want him to show you his number, and that way you can't change your mind later, right? Now this is your number. Once you've typed it and shown it, you're stuck with it. It is your number. We got it? Cool. All right, and this is hard to do from afar, but you're on the bench and you're wearing a little winter hat even though it's 90 degrees outside. You, what's your number? 12,000? You have $12,000? Okay, good. Guy in sort of the first row of people standing wearing a red jacket. You don't have everything. All right, I don't believe you. Okay, guy over there behind Dr. Olafson in the green shirt. Yeah. $15. Good. Thank you for your honesty. Look, isn't that fun? Now, it's really fun because I think you learn a lot about yourself. You also, maybe more important, learn a lot about your neighbors. Like that guy in the green jacket is a total selfish bastard, and we know that now. I might have suspected it anyway, but now we know. Look, you could ask these questions about anything. How much would I spend to prevent a school shooting on the other side of the country at a school I don't know? Would I pay to end poverty if it meant that my taxes would go up? Would I vote, would I vote to send troops, American troops, somewhere else to stop a genocide on the other side of the world in a country I've never heard of? How much would I pay to decide the next election? I mean, Vladimir Putin is asking himself that question right now. And you can do it with personal issues too, right? What's it worth to see your grandchildren? Is it worth risking my life? Is it worth risking somebody else's life? Like, what's the value of my own life anyway? And the value isn't everything. It can't be. Now look, for economists, they ask themselves this kind of question all the time. For them, it's normal. I remember the sort of romantic evening when I asked Professor Byun to marry me, and I said, Professor Byun, will you marry me? And she pulls out a calculator. She did, but it was for other reasons. Anyway, the fact of the matter is that we all do this all the time, even if we're not economists, and it's not just a theoretical issue. We could reduce the chances of a school shooting to nothing if we close down schools entirely. That's just not a risk that any of us want to take, and so we're ready to endure some risk. We could end traffic fatalities. We could end our reliance on fossil fuels, but only if we all agreed to never drive our cars again. And so after you realize that it's all about trade-offs, the only question left is a negotiation about price. And I know it's fashionable to say that you can't put a price on a human life, but you can, and we all do it every day. If you really thought that your life was worth an infinite amount, you would never drive a car, you would never go swimming, you'd never cross the street. And so the fact that we do these things means that on some level, we're all willing to trade security for fun. And that's good. Like, that's a good thing sometimes, because life wouldn't be worth living if we didn't. But problems arise when we all have different ideas, when we all want different things, because as a society, we sometimes have to make decisions that affect all of us, and that would be easy if we all agreed, but we don't. I mean, we saw right here in that little scenario, we each had a different number. And so a new question arises, right? And that question is, how do you make group decisions when people in the group disagree? And if you're in my comparative politics class now, you know that that's the definition of politics. That's the definition right there, right? Politics is the process we use to make a group decision when people in the group disagree. And like economics, politics is actually the kind of thing you're doing all the time. You just don't necessarily think about it. You want to end the pandemic? It's easy. You just declare martial law and issue a stay-at-home order, and you imprison anybody who violates the law. And that would end the pandemic, at least for law-abiding citizens. But the fact that we don't do that means that we're just not ready to pay that price for it, right? But the trade-off is really very simple, right? We either stay open and more people die, or we stay closed and more people suffer. And that's it. After we realize that that's what it is, it's just a matter of negotiating about price. It's just a matter of figuring out how much sacrifice we're willing to endure in order to save lives. And that's why it's crazy to me that this has somehow become a partisan issue, like the issue of do we open up or not? Because it's a political question, I get that. I mean, we can either open up or we can stay shut. We all want something different, and yet we have to make a common decision. That's politics, I get that. And there's no wrong answer. I mean, it's easy for me to say that we should stay shut down. I'm not gonna lose my house if I miss one paycheck. I have elderly parents and I'll do anything to save them. Actually, we talked about this, almost anything. But other people aren't as lucky as I am, right? And other people just don't have that privilege, and they don't give a shirt about my parents. And so for them, the calculation is different, and for them, the right thing to do is to open up. And for them, that's right. That's their risk assessment. And you know, that's it. So what gets me is not that we have people on both sides of this issue, but that it's so broken down by party line, right? Where you have these conservatives, and they talk about how every life is sacred and all lives matter, except when it comes to the death penalty, right? I mean, they're not fanatics about it. They're pro-life, but nobody, we don't want to be crazy about that. But all lives matter, and you can't put a price on human life, but we got to open the economy up right now, even though it means that people will die. And then you got liberals, right? And they care so much about the poor and the disadvantaged and those who didn't have the same educational opportunities I have, unless they're a poor redneck, in which case screw them, because those mouth breathers should have just known that they're being irresponsible, even though they also have families to feed, and even though they also struggle to make ends meet. Like, you gotta love hypocrisy. I get both sides of this issue, I really do. What I don't get is how we somehow arrived at this situation where your political party decides where your view is. And where you have conservatives who want to open things up, and the conservatives want to open things up, and if you think that's dangerous, that's just your liberal news media and their fake news. And then you got liberals, right? And they want things to stay closed, and if you disagree, you're stupid and you're indifferent to communities of color who, it must be said, really are suffering disproportionately from this thing. And so, as is so often the case, the only people who are wrong are those who have the false confidence to think that they're right. And unfortunately, it's basically everybody right now. So anyway, politics is the way we make group decisions when people in the group disagree. And generally speaking, there are sort of two ways you can do this. There are two paths you can go down to deal with people who share your society but who disagree with you, right? You can vote and negotiate and sort of compromise and figure something out, or you can arm yourselves to the teeth and try to kill them. These are the two political solutions. That's why in a political science class you tend to either study trade or things like trade, or war and things like war. These are the two ways that people make a decision when there are other people around who disagree with them. Well, like it or not, we share a society with people who disagree with us. And we have a choice. We can try to talk to them, or we can try to kill them. And oh boy, if we don't figure out how to talk to them, that second option is going to be the only thing left. And that's terrible. From a humanist perspective, as a political scientist, it's fantastic. More genocides to study, yay, like it's great. More research opportunities, I love that stuff. Political scientists love that stuff, but humans hate it, and they're right to be scared because it's dangerous as hell. Well, in fact, the COVID situation isn't just any ordinary political situation. It's what we call a collective action problem. And collective action problems are interesting because they involve a political situation. They call for a political solution, but in a scenario where we all agree. And that's because we all do agree. We all want the pandemic to end. We all want Wabash to stay open. We all want things to be as normal as possible at a time when things are anything but. So let's face it, we all do want the same thing. So if we all want the same thing, why don't we just get that thing? Why don't we just do it? Why is there a collective action problem? Well, the problem comes because this is one of those situations where the public interest and the private interest kind of go in different directions, right? This is one of those scenarios where we all want something good. But in order to get it, all of us, or most of us, have to do our part. But the problem is that involves a personal sacrifice, and I don't want that, right? I'd rather sit around and watch everybody else do their part and then come right in and enjoy the public good, because that way I can have my cake and I can eat it too. Now, we all know these scenarios. We all know collective action problems. We've all witnessed them, and if we're honest with ourselves, we've all been part of them, probably at one point or another on either side of that ledger. We've all done our part for a group project and then watched as nobody else did and we were left with nothing. And we've all also probably sat by and watched as everybody else did their part and we did nothing except at the very last minute we walked in at just the right time to collect the spoils. We've probably all done that too. And if you say you haven't, you're either a saint or you're a double bastard, once for free riding and now for lying about it. Politics and collective action problems go hand in hand. They come together, and that's because we as a society need to choose how or even if we're going to solve a collective action problem. Look, we all want fire stations. Everybody wants fire stations, but nobody would pay for them if it's voluntary. And so we need to decide if we're going to have fire stations and how much we're going to pay to have them and what to do about people who don't contribute. We could, end our environmental problems, and we all want that too. We all love the environment. Even Republicans love the environment. We just disagree about how much peril it's in, and about how much we're willing to sacrifice in order to get it. Well, COVID is a collective action problem. It is. It's weird because it's funny. It doesn't look that way at first. It looks like the kind of situation where if I wear my mask and I do my part and I wash my hands, then I won't get it. But if you don't wear a mask, then you have a better chance of you have a higher chance of getting it. But that's your risk. Like, who am I to tell you what your risk assessment should be? The problem is that COVID doesn't actually work that way, right? It's a group decision. It's the kind of thing that affects all of us. Nobody's mask is perfect. Nobody can keep their distance all the time. You can't avoid incidental contact. And so instead of making sure that everybody does exactly the right thing all the time, which would be impossible, it's a little bit different. And I wish that as a society we did better at explaining that this is how it is, but we just don't explain this well. I think everybody should take a statistics class, but that's me. Instead of it being about making sure that everybody does exactly the right thing all the time, it's about making sure that enough people do the right thing enough of the time so that there's just not a lot of COVID around. And that way, we're not likely to get it even when we occasionally screw up. The flip side of this, though, is that there's an individual involved, right? And that it really doesn't matter, I probably shouldn't say this, but it really doesn't matter what you do. Actually, I'm going to point at the selfish bastard guy again. It doesn't matter what you do. I mean, let's face it, if we all did our part and you didn't, there'd be nobody for you to catch it from in the first place. But even though it doesn't matter what you do, it totally matters what you do, right? Because if enough of us step up and take precautions, we will stay open. And if too many of us cheat, even just some of the time, we will close. And the disappointing thing is that it's going to be one or the other, regardless of what we as individuals actually do about it. The result is the same. The result of this brave experiment, and it's brave, trust me, it's brave. A lot of people aren't staying open the way that we are. But the result of this brave experiment is that it's either going to work or it's not going to work. And what's sad is that it's going to work or not work based entirely not on what we as individuals do. Okay, well, there are two ways around a collective action problem. Two ways that you can solve the collective action problem and sort of resolve the collective interest and the public interest going in different ways. And those ways come in sort of two ways, right? It's either top-down or it's bottom-up. Now, Wabash just isn't really made for top-down. I mean, we have one rule. Don't be a jerk. Don't pee in the chapel. Like, be a gentleman at all times. Like, that's not exactly a top-heavy set of rules. And it's worth saying that in recent years, we've become a little bit more top-heavy than we used to be. And look, I, for one, I'm not a big fan of that, but that's a different conversation for a different time. But Wabash is great. We're like perfectly set up for solutions that are bottom-up. And that's because we're small, and we know each other, and we watch each other, and we keep tabs on each other, and you know that if you screw up, your brothers are gonna know it, and they're gonna tease you about it, and they're gonna give you a nickname for it. And it's gonna be your nickname for your next 4 years, and for alumni weekends for the rest of your life. I mean, that's it, right? We're a close-knit community. We keep tabs on each other, and that can be good, and that can be bad, but in this scenario right now, it's really good. All right, so I've told you why you should do your part for you, and I've told you why, even if you're not convinced that you should do your part for you, you should do it for other people. This isn't really just an individual scenario. COVID just doesn't work that way. But just in case you aren't yet convinced, let me put this in a way that we all understand. Let me put this in a language that I know we all get. You ready? DePaul is still open. And yeah, they're open in that kind of wimpy DePaul way where only half their students are on campus at any given time, but they're open and we're open for now. And if we close before they do, we lose. This is this year's bell game. This is the only game we got on the schedule. This is all we got. And the way I see it, there are two ways that we can win this thing. There are two ways that we can stay open longer than they do. First, we can devise a way to give them all COVID. Okay, so we're not going to do that. We are so not going to do that. We could, but we are not going to do that. We're not the New England Patriots. If we win this, we're going to win it fairly. And so that only leaves time and an option for the other scenario, right? Which is that we got to take this thing more seriously than anybody even thinks is reasonable. And I want you to think about how satisfying it'll be, because you know that there are people out there who think that we're crazy, right? They think, and not just crazy for this, but crazy for being Wabash in general. And they think that we're just a bunch of toxic goons, to let everything ride on one rule, particularly in a case like this. And they think we're nuts. And so I want you to think about how satisfying it's going to be when, come graduation time, we've been open the whole time and we get to show the world and DePaul that we really are different. This is how we prove the skeptics wrong. So let's do it. Let's win this thing. Wabash always fights.